Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I think I'll get going until, yeah, I'll just get going. So thank you for joining us today for this webinar about textile labeling and of course supplier collaboration. Now, there we go. So the agenda for today is that I'll talk a bit about the EU labeling legislation that we have now, and then of course which expectations there are for future regulations, and for the update of the current ones, and what we of course recommend with inspiration from the industry. In the meantime, so what to do as of now, talk a bit about the supplier collaboration, and then I'm very happy to introduce Marie-Louise, who will be joining me to talk about other aspects of the care label and the care instructions. In the end, we'll have Q&A, but as always, you can ask the question anytime during the presentation in the Q&A, and we'll answer them during the presentation or afterwards, depending on the question, depending on whether it's a question for me or for Marie-Louise. I also want to emphasize that we, of course, have a lot of knowledge within the area about labeling. But of course, if there are some things that we don't know that we can't answer as of now, I will jot down the questions that you have, and then I'll definitely get back to you with an answer once I've investigated. So that's just sort of to say that I'll try to answer as many of your questions as I can with the knowledge that I have and the experience I have from the industry and from what I am aware of. So let's get going. Right. So in the beginning, we have this EU labeling regulations. Now the regulations are actually dated back from 2011, which means that they are of course quite old. They're also quite vague, I would say. I've inputted some of the articles that are in the legislation, but I do reading through it, I feel like it is quite vague. Looking in on the many different aspects that we do actually feel like should be in our labeling. Now, just a brief sum up of what it actually says in the legislation. Textile fiber names, they must be marked with the correct terms. And there is this appendix in the legislation with all of the different fibers that are the correct terms. So they need to be in that, and no abbreviations may be written instead of the correct terms. Now, the fiber names must be stated as a percentage, and the products must have the labeling or the marking. Now, there can be some exceptions where common labeling is sufficient, and the labeling marking is not required. Labeling or marking must be durable, easy to read, visible and accessible if a label is used, and it must be securely attached to the garment. So as a normal care instruction, care label, as we would see it. But of course, there is also the possibility of printing it in the garment. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a label. That isn't emphasized in the legislation either. It can also be printed in the garment, for example, in the neck, if you have a body, a children's body, or it could be a shirt as well. But that's also okay. It's just if it is a label, it must be securely attached. And of course, it also states in terms of the official languages. So that means that it must be in the languages that of the countries that you are selling to. Now, looking into sort of the new regulations, because as we all know, there has happened a lot since 2011 in the industry. We know much more. We're using a lot of new different fibers with a lot of new different new aspects like recycling, etc., where the old legislation isn't quite sufficient in terms of that. It also isn't possibly efficient enough in terms of reporting requirements. So therefore, there is, of course, as a part of the EU Green Deal and the strategy, they are aiming to update the regulations in accordance. So the aim is, of course, to address the different things that are in the EU Green Deal and, of course, the EU strategy, taking into account this impact of the textile industry in terms of the environment and social compliance. The Commission, I've just input a screen dump from the EU Commission in terms of the process that they're going through right now. Just on the 15th of April this year, the public consultation, the last one, was closed. So that was where you could give the feedback in terms of the updating versions will come. And then it is, as of now, expected that the adoption will be in the first quarter of 2025. And of course, there will possibly, or there will likely be an implementation period, etc. Those details aren't set in stone yet. So there is sort of a waiting period until then, until we know of this. We also know that the objective of the initiative, as mentioned as well, in terms of the EU strategy, but of course also in terms of the Green Deal, there are also other things that are expected to be considered in the new regulations. The whole digital product passport is, of course, a big part of it. Which sort of information are going to have to be in the digital, or by regulations have to be in the digital product passport, and which sort of information should be on the care label? Should it be double, or should it be in some sort of division between the two? I'm going to take, of course, the origin has to be there, also has to be there, should be there today. Yeah, an EU-wide uniform size they're taking into consideration. They're also, of course, taking into consideration all of these harmful chemicals, which is something that is very focused on as well, that we don't have any allergenic substances or harmful chemicals in the goods that we are producing. Flammability, and then again, as I just mentioned earlier, with the recycled content, organic or bioorganic origin, is also something that they need to take into consideration because that's very, very much something that people are focused on right now. And the last thing is the social responsibility, which taps into many of the other regulations as well in terms of documentation and documenting social responsibility in the supply chain. So in the meantime, what do we do then? Because of course, we do at DeLog have a lot of questions in regards to this area. We do have a lot of questions in terms of how do we build our care label? What is mandatory? What do we have to take into consideration, etc. So we've tried to sort of list up with inspiration both from the legislation and also, of course, from inspiration from the current situation as it is today. There's just one question. I'll quickly just answer that. Yes, I will share the presentation, definitely. We will share the recording of today, and of course, the presentation will also be shared to you. Very good question. So, in the meantime, what needs to be considered when you sit with your care labels? One thing is translations, all of the very many different translations that you need to have on your care label. Basically, the first thing that needs to be thought about is which countries are we selling to and which languages do they have, which we need to translate to. So that is a matter of, looking at the different markets that you're in, ensuring that you have the translations that are relevant to the market that you're in. There might be some differentiations where a country is accepting a language. It could be a country accepting English, for example, but that is country specific. Now, as a general rule, add the languages that are in the country that you're selling to. That's just the general rule. Fiber content label is mandatory, so you have to mention on the labels which fiber content is in it, if it is at least consisted of 80% textile. So fiber is you have to, of course, put that in, and it has to be, of course, with the exact percentage of how much of the different components that are in. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. Certified, recycled, or other secondary attributes that might be relevant for the fiber, where the origin is, or the raw material, which raw material that the fiber consists of, are to be listed actually elsewhere. So that could be in a different place on the care label, could be on the hang tag. It is actually only allowed to have the generic terms in the composition on your care labels. So if you want to write that, let's say you have a garment which consists of recycled and organic material, that must be stated elsewhere. I know that there are a lot that are putting them in brackets as a solution, and that is not something that is stated in the legislation that that's okay to do. But in my experience in the industry, it's also not something that is enforced. So not to say that it's allowed via the legislation, but I know that there are a lot of people that are sort of doing that to ensure that you are informing the customer of that attribute. But it's definitely not allowed to put, let's say, 100% recycled cotton. It has to be 100% cotton, and then the information of the attribute has to be elsewhere. And of course, it's not allowed to use any trademarks as well. So if, for example, the very common example is spandex, that fiber term is elastan. So of course, the generic term elastan needs to be used, even though that the information in the trademark spandex is used. I've input the link as well from the actual legislation, because in there you can see the Annex 1 with the list of the different fibers that are allowed to use. And that's basically the one that is, as of now, allowed to use on our labels. In terms of care symbols, now the interesting thing is that it doesn't actually say anything about specific care symbols, or actually not instructions either. So these terms of do not bleach or wash with fluent detergent, or whichever could be, it doesn't say that, but the recommendation is, of course, to do it. And everybody does it as well, because there's also a matter of it sort of is the user guide for a garment. You know, how do I treat this? How do I use this and care for this in the best way possible? Now, the genetics and other organizations have gone together at some point, and they've actually created this ISO standard as well. So the ISO standard is where that's actually the one where you have these generic symbols that we know of today, which is also the one in the pictures from genetics. So I would recommend using that because then you are definitely sure that you're using the correct ones in the order that is there. Yeah, so this standard, as I said, it covers the order of the symbols, and that is washing, bleaching, drying, ironing, and professional care, if possible, or with the over. Yeah. So if just sort of to sum up what I've just said, 1, use the generic terms for your fibers in the garment. Other descriptions such as recycled, organic should be elsewhere on the hang tag. There is a question here in terms of, is it illegal to write in the care label 100% polyester, bracket recycled, bracket end, if they have the TC, the transaction certificate, which is a really good question. First question is, via the legislation, you have to write 100% polyester, and the recycled has to be, you know, definitely not before the polyester. If you write it in brackets, I haven't yet experienced that that's not okay, and that's something that has been enforced, but I would maybe recommend it to also write it elsewhere. In terms of the legislation, it's just really important that you have the 100% polyester, because that's sort of the generic description of the term, the fiber term. In terms of the TC, the transaction certificate, you are very much correct that the TC is your documentation for writing the recycled. So in terms of legislation-wise, if you're allowed to write recycled without documentation, no, you're not. So it's sort of a two-way answer. And so exactly, so again, a question, so to understand it correctly, the 100% needs to be before recycled. 100% polyester, that's the generic term of what is the fiber composition, and then the recycled needs to be elsewhere. Either afterwards, if you feel that, but it could also be underneath somewhere. This product consists of 100% recycled material, as long as it's not in the generic description of the composition. Of course, use clear, legible text. So it needs to be legible. That's also very important if you print it, so that you ensure that you're using the correct size and color, etc., so that it's very legible for the end user. Trademarks, other terms are also to be stated elsewhere on the care label. The example is also lensing qualities. So if you, for example, are using EUØS or Tencel from lensing, that's absolutely perfect to write somewhere, and you're actually prohibited to, you have to use that, not prohibited, sorry, you have to use that term when you have the trademark, when you are buying that to state it. But what you can do is you are allowed to use the logo from lensing, so that could be the EUØS logo or the Tencel logo, and you can have that elsewhere on your product. You can describe it elsewhere. So trademarks is, for example, the spandex and the lensing qualities, etc. So many of the ones where you have the small TM, which is afterwards, and there are many others. It's where they have a sort of a name for the fiber. So then the EUØS is, for example, viscose, but it's a trademark from lensing explaining, there is values in the EUØS from lensing, but you're not allowed to write 100% EUØS. You're only allowed to write 100% viscose, and then the EUØS can be stated elsewhere. Yeah. Washing symbols, this is the example, and that is also the one from genetics as well. So I would recommend to use that order of the care symbols, and then of course use and I won't get into that too much because Marie-Louise will join me in talking a lot about that, but use the instructions as education on best practice for your end consumer. So don't limit what you say, but rather use it as a way to help your customers in using and caring for the garment in the best way possible. And the one thing that I have to stress is that there are, unfortunately, regulations that are not necessarily specific to the EU one. So there might be country-specific regulations. The example here is, of course, that, for example, the US and Japan, they have other symbols which you have to use if you are importing to their countries. The US also has a very specific one where you have to have the country of origin on the visible on the garment, for example. So there are these country-specific ones, and I do also want to recommend, together with this one, that if you are uncertain of anything in terms of this, there is always the very, very helpful companies that have specialized themselves in creating care labels, where they centralize the production of care labels and send them out to your suppliers, because in that way you can unify the way that you're creating them and ensure that you have the correct information on them. So that's just also a recommendation from here. Now, diving a bit into the importance of the suppliers, because I think we need to remember the fact that they are actually the ones, of course, supplying the garments, supplying the products, which means that they actually also are the ones that know best here. So I have to really, in my many years in the industry, I really stress the fact that they are the ones that know best in terms of how to care for the product that we are creating together with them. So one thing is that we of course have knowledge of the legislation that we need and the information that we need in the care label, but how to take care of it and which symbols to use. Is it does it have to be 30° or 40° or 60° or no wash, dry clean only, etc. That is something that is definitely that you have to write together with, figure out together with your supplier. It's a collaboration with them. They know best because they are also the ones in many cases where they are the ones that can that are directly in contact with fabric mills, dyeing mills, etc. And a lot of these different mills then they treat the garment or the fabric in a way that has an impact on how you can treat that garment in the end. So it's really important to have them in the loop. It's sort of, as stated, it's sort of their signature on how a garment produced by them should be treated. It does make the conversation about possible claims, etc., very much easier if you do have them in the discussion on which type of care instructions and care symbols should be on the garments. So this is really just to stress the importance of supplier collaboration in that. And touching upon that, I just wanted to briefly also show you that there is, of course, the possibility of working with this in Delog. We are a PLM system, for those of you who don't know that, which means that we are very much a part of the development stage of for our brands, for our customers. And the developing stage is, of course, including samples and the choice of which components a style is meant to consist of. So this is also where if you have the care of a product in the developing stage, you're actually able to maybe alter something or adjust something so that you are able to make the best product, which is able to be cared for the best. So it's just to stress the fact that it's actually quite nice to be able to work and collaborate with your suppliers in a platform where you can discuss back and forth which is the best decision for this garment going further. It taps into so many different things that are also future-wise and requirement-wise, legislation-wise, really important. So therefore we have this care instruction module in our platform. It is possible for the suppliers to add all of the information in the module, and then you are able to there discuss back and forth in the platform as well via communication. You can discuss back and forth what you want, and once you finalized it and are agreed upon what the care instructions should be for your garment specifically, then you can sort of lock it, and then everybody is in agreement that that's what we have. And you also have the history in the platform. What have we agreed on? What did we discuss? So you don't have to go to an email and who discussed it and who approved it and where is that PDF of that approval of that one care label. That could all be in your platform specifically to that garment. Yeah. And now I would like to introduce Marie-Louise. Yes. Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
So Marie-Louise, can you just maybe start by just telling me a bit about yourself?
Thank you, I will. And first of all, thank you for this invitation to talk about something which could be looked upon as a little bit boring, but it's fantastic. It's a fantastic platform for communicating. So I'm a trained weaver. Then I went to the design school, and since I finished that in the late 80s, I've been designing for the industry, mainly the Italian industry, and I've worked for interior and for garments. So I've been sort of all over the place. And for this last 15 years, I've been working with lensing, which have sort of put me into the middle of sustainability, how to work with sustainability, what is sustainability in an industrial scale. And this is what I find extremely interesting also because we have to do this on an industrial scale. This is a super tanker that we have to turn around very quickly, and so it's a challenge, but it's also a fantastic time to live in and have that possibility to push that thing. I've stopped designing more or less now, and I want to use my very broad knowledge and practical, especially practical know-how to help companies to get from the theory and the data to the product that follow these products that follow these data, and which is the sense and the core of the green transition.
Yeah. Do you want me to take the next slide?
Yes.
Yeah, take it away.
So yeah, care as in caring. So as I said, it could be looked upon as a little bit boring about talking about care labels, but care is and caring, that's not boring. That's one of the best things you can do, caring for other people or caring for products. So it is that is why this is so important, and it is a platform. It's a communication platform you can use to communicate with your customers. So this is what my approach to care label is, that I can share a lot of stuff with my customers. I can try to also to link them better to me. There is, of course, a lot of things you have to do, and of course we have to do them because the law is not there for fun, it's there for a purpose, and it's very, very important that we have also a system where you know exactly where you can find specific knowledge. So that's very important for everything. So I think it's good that we can just not just spread all we want to do all over the surface, but we know this, tuk, tuk, we get it there, we find it there. When this is said, though, there's also sometimes some things we would like to share, because if we, for example, if we look to merino sweater, true, you can wash it on a woolen program with the right detergent. You can, so that's fine, and you can don't tumble it, stuff like that, fine. But you could also air it, and by that you keep it even better. It's better for the fiber, and you can keep it for longer. You can also talk about what you can do with it if something happens, how is the repairability, and if it's worn out for good, then what you can do then. And this is a sort of trying to, it's a nudging of the customer, of the end user. I prefer the word user, not necessarily the end user, because when is the end user? If we look on that things have to go to many people, then when is the end user? Am I the end user when I'm the first customer or whatever? Anyway, complicated things, but you know what I mean. So you nudge. It is, of course, a nudging of the people, but it's actually also a nudging about us, because it's a nudging about how do we think when we design and when we produce. But then it's a nudging that people should think about, really, that caring is very important of the things you have, so you can have them for not forever. That's not going to happen. Not forever, but for a long time. and you can assure that they will stay beautiful. So that is a very important thing. I know that I think that I know it's brand name Nudie Jeans, but they started out having that that connection to their clients. They said, you don't buy the first pair of jeans you buy with us, it's not a pair of jeans, you go into a lifelong relationship. That's very big words for a pair of jeans. But anyway, the idea is fine, and the idea is good, that you try to collaborate with your customers. So you try to build up a relationship. And for example, when you talk about also buying online stuff, then it's very important that you build up online commerce. If you build up a relationship, because most people, when they buy online, or a lot of people, they would like to buy from the same company or 2 or 3 companies, because then they know their sizes, they know what they can expect from them, and in that way it becomes more easy. You don't have to buy a small, a medium, and a large to get the right size. So it would also be much better for the world if we could work like that, and will not have to send so much stuff back.
Can I just ask you, Louise, because I thought it was quite interesting. You said in terms of that it's one thing is to the user, but the other thing is that it also, in terms of the design process or the buying process of the garment, can you maybe dive a bit more into that? Because I thought that was really interesting, that it's also the other way around, you know, in terms of which decisions you have to make when you design.
Yeah, it's of course it's also a little bit of my other very important topic that I always go around with. It's a designing for circularity, and designing for circularity, yes, and that's also my end point, that if we can make garments with less components, we don't have to make so long care labels, because there would not be so much to say. Actually, 100% wool, that would be perfect, because then it's going to be very short, like care labels, and people won't cut them away. But the thing about it's also connected, the design for circularity and the thinking about all what you do has an effect on the outcome. It has an effect of what happens with it in at end of life. It has the effect on the climate, and for that it is interesting. The communication, it also has to do with the communication, that you have to break down all the silos in the workflow, because you have to communicate back and forth all the time. That's also a little bit what I suppose that Deloc could do, because it's a communication thing, and a lot of what we're looking into is about communication.
Yeah.
And so if you can already in the design process look into what is going to happen with stuff at the end of life, but not that it becomes you mustn't be so focused at the end of life that you don't think about the life, because what the most important thing you can do when you create something is have a very long life cycle. And this is something that we could put into the care label. You could add a QR code for additional information. Of course, you can also have the law information there, so everything is together if you cut off the whole long care label. I've seen that sometimes that people have the QR code, and then they have the line for cutting after that QR code. So the QR code stays, and what is good about the QR code is that you can change the information that you can access. So when you have for example, if you have a new recycle system, recycle practices, you can put them in there and you can change the information all the time, which I think is fantastic, because things are going so fast, and things are going fast, and at the same time we have to keep our things for a very long time. So we need flexible systems.
Yeah, because I guess cutting it off is maybe a bit of a bad thing, because then you remove sort of the information of being able to recycle, etc. Right? I mean, it sort of removes the information on the garment.
Yeah. And it's a complex, because we all know that we don't like these long care labels. They are really annoying to have inside your garments. But if there is so much information, there's not really anything you can do it. And you could say that maybe it depends on also how the digital passport, product passport, will the physical form of it. But one could hope that it would solve some of these problems, because it would narrow. You're talking about QR code, and we could hope that that would solve some of that practical issues. And we're still making products, so we are facing practical issues and practical topics. Are you finding a care label inside your shirt?
I was just thinking that. No, but I was at somewhere the other day, where a seminar where they also talked about that, if they create in taking circularity and having this care label as the entry point to be able to circulate the garment, that would maybe also create the incentive to keep the care label, because it would sort of mean that you're not able to throw it away or give it anywhere if it doesn't have the care label, because you have to be able to scan it and everything. I thought that was really an interesting point, that it creates sort of this mental for the consumer. It creates this, okay, I have to keep it because I need to ensure that I can pass it on. For example, giving it to these platforms, the reseller platforms, or secondhand shop, that if you're not able to sell it further on these platforms without the care instructions, for example. I thought that was really interesting to give the incentive of how do we actually ensure that the care labels are there to stay if we're not able, because I remember we also talked about that, are we supposed to put small chips in all of our clothes, because maybe that sort of in terms of recycling makes it even more difficult. So there is a great many things I think that the EU is also having to take into consideration when they develop the new legislation, right?
But even already the care label, that's very often made of a synthetic material, even though we're talking about a pure linen shirt. And there already you have the problem, because then you could, I have done a lot of design of projects where I say, then I convince the customer to invest in cotton sewing thread, and so we make it all. But then at the end, I also have to convince them, and I have also succeeded in that we have to do the care label and all labels in the same fiber, because otherwise you are just so at least you don't have to remove it. That will remove it, and it will. I mean, we don't know how things are going to happen, but still try to do it as it's also important that you think about how your care label, what the material, so you don't add another material into your product.
Yeah, true. There is a lot of different aspects, because to be sort of the if we think about centralizing the care label creation, because you have so many legislations that you have to keep track of, that it's very much easier to centralize it with a company that knows a lot about it. Then I'm not sure it's going to be feasible to do it in the specific fabric of the specific garment, unless you're only creating one composition for all of your garments. So it is,
Great.
I mean, it is a difficulty. But again, it's also, Ahmad, that's also what we speak a lot about in terms of making these decisions and doing them for a reason. You know, do you do it because you want the care labels to stay there and your garments to extend life, then it might be okay to do it in a fabric that is not necessarily recyclable together with the garment, but maybe, yeah, I guess there are so many aspects that needs to be thought about in this as well.
Yeah, but it's I mean, even though unless it will only be trash when we recycle it, and still there it will be maybe the fibers are still good, and you can't know, something can happen to a shirt,
Yeah.
a spot you just can't remove, or a hole or something, so the rest of the fiber is fine.
Yeah.
But and then you have this and not a care label in another fiber,
Yeah.
that you can't, then you have then you're polluting
Yeah.
material. So of course you have to also find solutions that are doable.
Yeah.
So but on the other hand, you have to use your good sense. Really, it's about good sense. Most of, like we have said so many times before,
Yeah.
it's all about good sense, and not a lot of it. So
I also had a question to you, a final question in terms of, can we tie the customer to our brands through this concern?
I think I think that the more you try to give your customer, I mean, it of course depends on what type of customer you have. If you have customers who are just using the t-shirt and then throwing it away without not even washing it, I mean, if it's a mono use, then you can't. I don't know. I don't think you can tie customers to you that way. At least not for this purpose of keeping things around for a longer time. But if you try to, if you could also insert ideas for repairability. You
Yeah.
could also try to make people have more ideas about what they have bought from you. I know that it might be that they will buy less from you, and I know that there we have a problem, but we all know that at the end of the day, this is what we also have to do. Buy better and make better and less. And
Yeah.
if you really create a story around this, and I do it in a smart way, it's not that I have the actual solution for it, but if you create small stories and small ideas, and you say, okay, when this garment, when this skirt is over, then you can make small pillows of it, if this is what you want, and really try to push um, your customers' imagination. And if you're not going to make the cushions for yourself, then give it to someone who will do. So really try to open up their imagination. And I think that because we know perfectly well that most of us, we don't buy a garment, we buy the experience. It's experience driven what we do. So the more experience you can put into your garment, this could also the getting rid of it could also be the experience, and it could be the experience that you take care of it in a different way. So I have, just to say, I have a duvet, and of course it, after a lot of use, it has been it was threading, and then I mended it, and every time I put that on, it makes me happy, because I took care of this, because it was, I mean, it was almost 4 square meters of fabric back and forth that was still fine. It was only 10 centimeters in the top that was not fine, and I feel happy. And I don't do these sort of things because I don't know, maybe it's because I work with it, so I don't do it as a hobby. And but I have done something that I like. I like that special touch. Now this is my duvet, and no
Mm.
one else have it because I have done it personally. And it's the same thing also when you take care of your things, you air them instead of washing them. It's much easier to air things, and you can actually get through a winter with your sweaters without washing them.
Yeah.
Air them
But
every
I
time.
also think in terms of if you think about sort of the relationship between the brand and the customer, it
Mm,
also creates it gives the sort of a brand awareness
mm,
of
sure.
what is the thought behind the brand
Yeah.
when you help your customers in taking care of what they've bought from you in a certain way,
Mm,
which of course if you for example wrote on your garment that this doesn't need to be washed, as you know, if this doesn't need to be washed all winter, let's just say that you've
yeah.
written that on your
Yeah.
care label, that's
Mm,
also a statement which sort of emphasizes the brand value, right?
so
So
every yeah.
it gives your own sort of the brand gives the incentive to the customer to treat your stuff better, but it's also a branding thing.
Yes, it is, and you will think it's not that you will think every evening you go out you put your things on the balcony. It's not that you will
Yeah,
think about that brand every night, but now and then you will, and you will remember that. Oh, and this is actually much easier
yeah,
than washing a woolen sweater. That's actually quite complicated. So it will bring this brand to your mind, and that's
yeah.
exactly also what happens when you give gifts, and when you see this gift you've had some from someone have given you. You think about that person, and
Yeah,
it will be the same with the brand. They
exactly. Yeah,
taught me something. They
exactly.
opened my mind.
Exactly. All right. So there are just a few questions in the chat before we round up here. One question about if the log has the genetic symbols. We don't have them as a standard in the platform. That's something that the brands, our customers, deliver for us. They do that if they are, for example, a part of an organization. In Denmark, we have Dansk Mode Textile, who, when you are a part of that organization, you also have the ability to have the genetics symbols. But when you do have them through the organization, or if you've bought them, we can easily put them in our platform together with the different care instructions in the very many languages you might need, so that it's possible in the care module to add all of that from there. So it's easy. You just and we can help you get them in the platform. There's also a question which I have to be honest with you that I am not 100% sure if what to answer. But I've noted down the question, so I will try and see if I can find out that somewhere. It's a question about if you add more languages to the care label, if it needs to be specified which language it is, so that, for example, if you have it in the Netherlands or Germany, etc., do you have to write NL, DE, EN, etc. in front of the translation? Now, that was actually why I was checking my own here, because I don't think so, but I've noted the question down, and I will get you the answer and send it out as well. Then there was a question about label suppliers. Are there any label suppliers out there that use care label information upstream and connect Tier 3 and Tier 4 suppliers for supply chain regulation documentation? Yes, there actually are. I could do a bit of PR marketing of the company called Trimco. They have a module called Product DNA, where they can help with this. They do that on the PO level, which of course makes sense. So that's because they only get the information after PO is placed, because that's the way that they've chosen to do it. So they do it PO level, and they help with the mapping and etc. So that's really good. And the final question is if we get the recording of this. Yes, you do. So you get both the recording and you get the slides. as well. Afterwards, everybody who is here today or have not participated today but did sign up, you can always sign up to our webinars, and if you don't have time on the day, you will easily also get the recording and the slides afterwards. And of course, if in this case, if there is a question, I will also reply that question in that. Now for the final Q&A we've already done, I just want to do a bit of marketing for the next webinar we have. So that will be in 2 weeks on May 30th. And that is a product webinar where we will talk about how you work with the suppliers once you start working with the log, and during, of course, but especially in the beginning where both you as a brand needs to be onboarded to using the platform, but it's also very much the suppliers that needs to be onboarded if they've never tried working in the log before, because they have a very, very big part of working with our platform. So we will be talking about that next time. And I have no more questions. So I just want to say thank you very much to Marie-Louise for joining today, giving us great insights on this working with care labels aspects, which isn't necessarily only the legislation, etc. So thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you everybody as well for joining, and see you next time. Oh.